Hi, folks. We're Tacitus today. Tacitus today, your pushback channel. Thank you for joining this audio, radio, no pictures live stream. Please listen to this essay or this presentation as you would a radio broadcast, and listen to it in your truck or car as you're driving along, or stick in those earbuds and listen to it on public transport. Now, in this essay, I'd like to talk about debates, sort of public town hall debates about the morality or the wickedness and evilness of white people in the Western world and so on. Now, I've seen a number of these sort of town hall type things, and I haven't really bothered with them. They seem so silly that it's not worth talking about. A bunch of two-bit third world activists running around trying to morally lecture the West for their supposed wickedness. But when you listen to what they've come out with, it's either outright absolute nonsense, completely fact-free, or heavily, intensively cherry-picked, and so on. So again, I haven't really bothered with it, and they mostly pick children or women or whatever to do it. So again, I tend to ignore it. Anyway, there's recently a section taken out of the DOHA, the so-called DOHA, DOHA, DOHA debates that I think they were held in a university in northern England, maybe somewhere around Leeds, I think it was. And it was a kind of a town hall presentation thing where they were talking about, the overarching subject of this particular one, which was similar in really to others, is that the West controls the information and media narrative and thus the perception of world events. And as the West controls this, the West claims to be morally sort of superior in things like freedoms and things like that. Therefore, if they're remiss in any way, then they must be morally evil. And why should the West have this control of the narrative? And what makes you guys think that it's a good thing, or that you're using it properly or effectively or honestly or morally, as the detractors would argue? So that's the wider, they go into subsets of that, but that's the white West evil, white West do evil things, white West says they don't do it, but really they are. It's that type of stuff. Now, I wouldn't mind if they were picking independent people that were really very objectively picking apart the failings, because the West has the failings, by the way. There's no shortage of failings. Picks apart the failings of the West and presents those in an objective sense, because there's plenty of material to pick from there. You don't have to go looking very hard. The forced narratives about LGBTQ stuff and so on is being forced on the populace without their consent or agreement. That's that they could jump all over that, but they don't. Instead, they pick on other things. But anyway, the thing with one of these debates, well, it's not really a debate. I mean, it's they call it a debate, but one of these town hall gatherings, which had a typical sort of group of speakers. There's one sort of Western white guy who's quite sympathetic to all the anti-white, anti-Western narrative, but is not hysterical about it. Then they've got 3 or 4 super anti-Western people there, and maybe one person who is anyway prepared to support the West or argue on its behalf even, or to even present any facts. So one of these had Constantine Kissin on it. So he was a I don't know, what would you call it, a guest speaker, I suppose. And it came to the issue of slavery. Now, the majority of people that, interestingly, from societies that have been involved in slavery for thousands of years, they still treated slavery as being something that was uniquely white and Western. No one else ever did it, ever would do it. Therefore, it was purely a white enslavement of others, of blacks in this case, and it was only white people ever did it, and that's why white people are rich, because of slavery, which is such a hysterical piece of nonsense that it's barely worth responding to. But Constantine Kissin responded with pointing out that it was the British Empire that ended slavery, and it was the the British that had abolished it certainly in the Western world, and that this should be recognised. And he pointed out quite accurately that at the time the British were doing the slave thing, everybody was doing it. There was nothing unique about the British. The black people were enslaving each other, Arabs were enslaving black people, and white people were enslaving each other, and so on. And so everybody was doing the slave thing. There's nobody that wasn't doing it. So to single out the white British or the white British Empire or white people for this opprobrium is completely misplaced. Now, he was the subject of catcalling and jeers and sneers and people trying to talk over the top of him. He wasn't going to be put off his stride, so he kept going. Even the moderator tried to intercede on behalf of the catcallers, but he wasn't going to be put off, and he kept at it. And he stated facts, by the way. He wasn't making anything up. He stated facts. So I was surprised at why the audience would jeer at him and would say, no, that's not true. Now, some of these, they're ginned up on a few things. But firstly, is they've got the chip on the shoulder thing of the white race as being technologically superior to all other races for or any other parts of the world for 300 plus years. So this is something that none of these other races are particularly happy about. They've got a chip on their shoulder about it. Western technology and influence, whether it be through finance or whether it be through whatever, trade has been extensive around the world. So European or white influence. Initially it was really there was quite a few European nations. Holland, for example, had one of the first stock markets in the world, and they had an extensive trading empire, as indeed the British did. The French were very active around the place in international trade as well, and the British, of course, and the French and the Dutch all establishing colonies as part of a wider trading and mercantile thing, really. But so Western influence has been substantial, and the Middle East, for example, has been effectively the parameters of the Middle East in terms of national boundaries and things of that nature were also the tone, at the very least, was set by the West. Now, the Christian West, the infidel, and all this other things. So it's gone down like a lead balloon, and the activist nature of the education in these places, whether it be Pakistan, India, or Iran or Iraq or wherever, it doesn't matter. The activist education is that Whitey, everything is Whitey's fault, and these people have taken on board. So really, Constantine Kistner was the only one representing a Western view. But again, he relied on facts. The attacks against him did not rely on facts. Now, the activist, there was one Pakistani activist, a Pakistani feminist, I think, and was on stage there talking about it. And again, she very tightly cherry picked. Said, well, the West says that they have freedom of the press, which they don't currently, by the way. The West says they got freedom of the press, but that only applies if you don't come out with pro-Palestinian slogans such as the river to the sea and this. And so she asserts that shows that there's no freedom of the press, or that the freedom of the press is anti-Islamic or something like that. Now, I don't know. I see numerous marches up and down the length and breadth of Australia and the UK where that river to the sea is screamed out, and the police don't do anything. No one gets arrested. No one stops. So where is this lack of freedom of the press? If anything, the freedom of the press is only extended to people like the Palestinians, provided it disrupts and breaks social cohesion in the West. So there is a very selective freedom of the press. For example, if you call white people Nazis, then you're allowed to do that. But you misgender somebody, or you make an alleged racist remark, then you've got the police on your door. So freedom of the press is something that is selective and is globalist narrative controlled. The idea that it's white controlled or white people controlled or white government controlled, that's simply not true. It's globalist narrative controlled. That would be, but I noticed they didn't attack, none of the people attacked globalization in any way. They went after Western governments as if they were all sovereign and they were all homogenous in their views, attitudes, approaches, and beliefs. So there's no difference between, I don't know, France and America or something. Now some of this is something else that got me as well, was that the white people control the narrative and this sort of thing. And then you look at this town hall, the moderator's Islamic. Most of the people in the room, including the speakers, aren't white Western, and so the black and the brown people are completely dominating the town hall discussion about white people dominating the narrative. Fuck. So anyway, and I've seen a number of these things, but why do they laugh and jeer when Constantine Kissin or anybody says that it was the British Empire that abolished slavery? Why do they jeer? It's a fact. It's a verifiable fact, but they jeer. Now they take some other, different sort of views. They say, well, the fact that the West wants cheap peasant labor to come into the West, or that they use, factories in, I don't know, Pakistan, cheap peasant labor, means that slavery is kind of still going. It's just in a different form. They do have a point there, and I do understand that. But if all these cheap peasant labor, why do they go to the West if they think that they're going to be slaves? Why do they do it? So there's also other aspects where they think propaganda encourages illiterate peasants to go from third world countries to the West, where they are exploited, where it is, as they assert, something that's tantamount to slavery or modern slavery. Again, they do have a point there, but instead they go and attack the sovereignty of Britain, for example, instead of saying, well, this is part of a globalist sort of plan. Why don't they attack? But they, at no stage in any of these things that I've looked at, have they attacked the globalist class. Everything is attacking really the white person on the street. So, well, you did it. So again, you have to wonder whether these town halls are stalking horses and propaganda, controlled opposition type propaganda things that are in turn controlled by the globalists. Most of them come out of the bowels of very leftist academia. There's plenty of low IQ people at these students at these gatherings that supposedly have PhDs in political science or sociology or something like that. But gee whiz, I mean, I can't imagine I'd employ them for anything. But they're not that every student at these gatherings, by the way, is a radical activist. They're not. Some did point out and did take an objective, I thought reasonably objective position at least. One student, I'm thinking, now got up and said, look, we can't treat the West as one total homogenous block. It's not. And there are differences, which is true. So that was a reasonably objective observation and utterance to make. The way he said it suggested he was given that line to read rather than he thought it through himself. The people that were getting up and asking questions and delivering their understanding, it to me at least, it all suggested a rehearsed position rather than something that they understood and could clearly articulate through their own sort of brain power and number crunching and so on. It suggested prearranged script, and even that they practiced it in front of the mirror for a bit. That it had that sort of look about it. The moderator was quite prepared to intervene to stop pro-Western utterances being made, but was sat there smiling and nodding when anti-Western utterances were made. And this is the same pretty much in all of these gatherings. What they achieve, I can't really say. They really just hate on white people. They could do a much better job of getting a balanced group to talk about, and again, to focus on objectivity. And the moderator needs to jump in on people where they say, well, the West says this, but really they're just Nazis, that's all. And the invocation of Hitler and all this sort of stuff comes in. The moderator should jump on that and say, okay, well, you've said that, back it up with facts. So they're allowed to chortle on with just emotional bullshit that again, that only white people were ever involved in slavery. I mean, everybody really sitting there knows that's not true. So why is it allowed to pass unchallenged, which it is on any of these gatherings? Or they have such a perverse view of what constitutes slavery that. For example, because the British were more successful, because the British had a mercantile empire, and they were able to, look at vacant, unused land and turn it into farmland or whatever, and then, because black people were the only people who could work the land, that weren't going to die in the swamps and so on, and were impervious to white diseases, that they could make a profit out of these enterprises, whereas the black people didn't use slaves for commercial profit in that sense, and the Arabs didn't use slaves directly for commercial profit in the same way. So the argument is, well, that the slavery the white people did was worse only because the white people actually were able to effectively or successfully run businesses such as broad acre agriculture, cotton or whatever. So this is something that they argue is that the reason whites enslaving other people was bad is because they were able to turn it to commercial profit, is therefore somehow even more sinister and evil than anyone else's slavery, even though the other guys may have enslaved more people, been more brutal, castrated them, killed them in droves, but only because the white people turned it into commercial profit. But that's only because the mercantile empire, which was European driven, the mercantile empire worldwide, and there were multiple empires, again, Dutch and British and so on. The extension of the mercantile empire was the colonial era. The colonial era was very small population countries having large areas to cultivate and work in, and they in turn needed a workforce. And the idea, slavery at the time was as a labor exchange. It wasn't as we see it today of some morally bad thing where one enslaves or owns another. That wasn't how it was seen at the time. It was seen as a workforce issue, whether at the level of black people, Arabic people, or anyone else. It was perceived as a workforce issue, and so black people. But the idea that that's only because they turned a profit that it makes it morally reprehensible is an absurd proposition. You've been with Tassus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.